whatever nightmares the future holds are dreams compared to what's behind them.
Welcome back to Growing Up Punk, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. My name is David. On today's episode, Aaron gets the opportunity to chat with Jered Scott. Now, if you're sitting here going, the name is familiar, not 100% sure. Well, see, Jered Scott, not a musician necessarily, but still played a big role. He's a photographer, and specifically in this episode, Aaron chats with him about his work with a band we've talked about a little bit on the show, MXPX. So he's going to get into that in just a few minutes. But first, I thought I'd do some housekeeping. Make sure you go follow us on all of our social medias, at Growing Punk Pod on Instagram and Twitter. You can also find us on Facebook. We're also on YouTube. Maybe you're listening to this on YouTube. Who knows? We're available on all your favorite podcast apps as well if you are listening to this on YouTube. And head on over to our website, growingpunkpod.com. There's a number of things that you can do there. You can stay up to date with everything going on. If you want that weekly reminder, you can sign up for our mailing list there. You can also join our Patreon for $5 a month. You get bonus episodes, bonus content. So that's there on the website, growingpunkpod.com. We've also got our merch store. We've got some t-shirts you can buy. Want a picture of us riding a horse? Hey, you can do so by going on over to growingpunkpod.com, clicking on merch, and getting yourself one of those. Other than that, let's get into this interview. It is Aaron and Jered Scott, photographer on Growing Up Punk.
So have you been a longtime fan of MXPX, or did you get into them, in the last kind of 10 years, or what do you remember about getting into them? Do you have a first album that you first heard, or what kind of hooked you on them?
Oh yeah. So in 8th grade, I was sitting in the back of my friend's van with him, and we were headed to a theme park in California with his parents, and he had a Discman and I had a Discman, and I think each of us maybe had one CD, and after we had both finished listening to our albums, we switched, and I had the first Goldfinger record, and he had some green and other green and white spiral looking CD. And I put it on, and I think maybe the second or third song I paused it and tapped him, and I was like, what is this? And he handed me the case, and it was Teenage Politics.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my goodness. And I couldn't stop listening to it. And by the end of that car ride, I had convinced him to trade CDs with me for keeps. So that's when I got into him in like 95.
Yeah, I think that's when that came out.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I mean, I fell in love with everything that they did from then on out, and was definitely a big fan. I think it was maybe 3 or so years later, I don't know if it was my sophomore, maybe junior year of high school, I got to see them for the first time. I drove with some friends 3 hours down to Huntington Beach, California, and watched them play with the Hippos.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the first show I ever got to see of them. And that definitely changed my life, seeing Tom run by me and my friends while we were standing around waiting, kind of outside the venue. And he jumped over these picnic tables and sat down next to some people and was talking. And I was like, oh man, he's a real person. And he's just hanging out right over there. I could walk up if I had the guts.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, and did you kind of keep following them all through their discography, or did they kind of come in and out of your kind of musical journey?
No, I definitely stuck with them. I know my interest waned a little bit in those late kind of middle years. I don't think I was I think it was after Before Everything and After I sort of I got really into that album for a minute, and then kind of lost interest. And then when they kind of disappeared for a moment, like, I definitely was always trying to keep an eye out, but then like I remember Panic came out, and one of my friends from where I grew up like sang backing vocals on a couple of those songs, so I was really excited to like get it and check it out. And,
Yeah. Was that Seth?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so Seth and I grew up in the same town same area through like the high school years, and then in high school I played in a band and we played some shows together.
Okay, awesome.
quite often. So so I had that tie, to like check that out and stuff, and then then I don't remember exactly how many years it was between Panic and Secret Weapon, but I remember Secret Weapon kind of caught me off guard because I was like, oh, I thought these guys were like, even though I loved them and they had been my favorite band for so long, I was like, I didn't know they were still doing something.
Yeah.
Like legit. And one of my friends and old bandmates was actually the one that was like, oh yeah, they have this new album out and it's amazing. And I remember running to Best Buy and grabbing it and being like, oh God, they're back. So
yeah. They definitely had kind of a musical journey kind of in those last handful of albums. So yeah, we just talked about Secret Weapon on or actually I guess in the episode coming out, and yeah, I think it kind of caught, Panic definitely, they were kind of a bit more back to their punk roots on Panic, and Secret Weapon just kind of, placed them in that spot again after, kind of going a little bit more mainstream, with their Passing Moment and Before Everything and After. And so, yeah, it was great to, I love those albums, but I think for many, they were kind of happy to kind of have them back with their bit more gritty sound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how long? Yeah, so kind of skipping ahead, like how long have you been shooting for MXPX, and how did that originally get connected? Like how did that come about?
So I shot my first show in 2007, and it was sort of like the tail end, or it might have been even their last record store in-store performance that they were doing during Secret Weapon. And I had just gotten into photography and was stepping more into shooting bands. I'd had an opportunity to shoot like Sherwood and May and a couple other bands over the course of a few months, and then found myself going to Portland with a friend, trying to set up photo shoots and things. And while I was there looking up Portland and Seattle based concerts, I think back then on like Polestar's website or something.
Okay, yeah.
I saw that MXPX was playing at what I thought was a venue called Silver Platters in Seattle. And then when I looked it up, I was like, oh, this is a record store. And I emailed Seth and was like, hey, I'm up in Portland and I'd love to go shoot this show. Could you reach out to the guys? And he wrote me back and was like, yep, I emailed them. They said it's a free record store show. And they're totally fine if you want to shoot. So my friend and I drove up, and I, nervously and anxiously pushed my way towards the front of the crowd in there so I could be in a good spot to shoot, and then shot the show. And afterwards, I found their tech, James at the time, and just approached him and I said, hey man, I shot some photos today. How could I get them to anybody? And he gave me Mike's mom, Michelle's email address. And, that's what started everything.
And so what was the follow-up to that? Like, did they respond saying, hey, we like them, or come shoot us again? Or how did that relationship turn from, you just kind of showing up through a connection to actually being their photographer? And what was that first shoot, being their photographer?
Yeah. So Michelle wrote me back. She said she loved the images and wanted to put them on their website. I was elated, oh my gosh, my photos are going to be on my favorite band's website. This is amazing. And back then, everything for me was like just trying to chase down leads. How do I turn this into an opportunity? And so I think it was a couple months later, maybe end of the summer, they were playing a little like action sports fest in San Diego, and I lived close to there. So I emailed her and I said, this is happening. Would I be able to get a pass to go shoot it? And she said, absolutely. So I went and I shot that. And right before I got there, she emailed me and said, their tour manager is going to ask you this favor. They need passport photos. So if you could shoot a passport photo type image of each of them, that would be helpful. And I was like, oh, okay. Because at that in-store, I didn't really interact with anybody. I just showed up, took some photos. So I had a tiny bit of interaction with them, and in San Diego, they, I want to say Tom may have seen the photos that went up on their website and mentioned that, and I got to I got access to the stage and got to walk around on the stage while they were playing and shoot, and so we didn't hang out or talk that much. I was still really timid, and I also remember. Their friend Jordan from Newfound showed up because he lived in San Diego. And so they were hanging out with him backstage, and that made me even more timid here's this singer of another band I love, and I didn't want to get in the way. And so I was like, my mindset was do a good job, take rad photos, make them notice. And so I shot that, sent the photos to Michelle. She loved them again. And a couple months after that, they were playing their first show in their career at this little legendary punk club called Chain Reaction.
Oh, yeah.
And I was able to turn that into an opportunity through this blog that I was shooting for. They wrote about up-and-coming bands, and somehow I convinced them to let me cover MXPX, who was definitely not an up-and-coming band. And so I got to interview Tom, and then I got to do a photo shoot with the band. And that was actual interaction and talking and getting them to laugh. And I definitely hung around that day and was backstage. And I want to say Seth's band played that show. So he was there, and that made it easier, me having a friend. But it was shortly after that Mike called me, and so that was a weird day, to answer my phone and for him to go, "Hey, Jered, this is Mike Herrera," and I'm just like, "Oh, what?" And he had a photo that I had taken of him sitting on a couch with an acoustic guitar, and he's like, "Hey, I wanted to use that picture as a tour poster to announce these shows that I'm doing with this new country side project." And so, we talked for a little bit about that, and it was coming through Southern California. And again, me looking at opportunities, and here's, the singer of my favorite band. This seems like a good opportunity. So I just said, when you guys are down here, do you guys want to do some stuff together? And he's like, that'd be great. So we did a few shows together, and that I think is what really started to open the door. MX came back down to California a month or two after that for some sort of holiday show at a venue in Hollywood. And so I got to go, hang out and shoot that. And a few months later, I think it was the spring of 2008, I had pitched to them hey, what if I flew out to the East Coast and rode on, a few shows with you guys and shot some stuff? And they were like, cool. And I think it was at a festival that I was hanging and shooting with them in SoCal that they had mentioned. I think I was asking them what they were up to, and they mentioned that they were working on a new cover record. And I was like, oh man, you guys, we should do something together, and you guys should dress up like all the bands that you're covering, and that should be the CD book.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, let's do it. And so that summer, then I got to fly up and shoot that. And that was crazy that this like funny on the spot idea became a reality. And here I am, like shooting my first album cover, all that kind of stuff, trying to recreate, what I had grown up on. And then it was after that I pitched, the whole, like, can I come on tour with you guys? And so the fall of 2008, I went on the US leg of the co-headlining tour they did with Lagwagon.
Oh man.
And that started, I think that those things like kind of really started it. Like they had never really had somebody tour with them doing photography.
Just kind of crazy because they've been around for a long time to not have someone with them. But maybe that wasn't as popular of a thing then.
It wasn't. Yeah, that's what I learned. Like I had a friend that I had met just a year before, and he had just taken off being the photographer for Switchfoot. And so I saw, oh, this is possible. Like here's somebody that I know that's going out with a band today and doing these things. It's not a thing from the past, like some guy who toured with U2 forever. Like,
right.
No. Like, but social media wasn't a big thing yet. Like, I remember, I think I introduced Mike to Twitter. Like, I was like, hey, my friends introduced me to this thing and you should check it out. And so it was really just me trying to like get them more content for their website and to come up with like images that we could, make a poster or a t-shirt or something out of, just because that was the stuff that I had on my walls growing up. And I wanted to give that to somebody else, and have them be able to put it on their wall or something. So, and so, I just kind of fell into that relationship. Like it just snowballed. And then 2008, that tour right after that, they kind of slowed down. And then 2009, I think maybe 2010 was when Yuri was like, I think I'm done.
Right.
And they did the Life in General show. And so for those next few years that they were kind of on again, off again, like here or there, like I just found like if they came to Southern California for a minute, like, because I live there, I did some stuff, or, it was easy to drive to Vegas to do that show. And then a year later when they were going to do it, in Seattle, play Life in General again, I had been around enough that they were like, hey, we want to fly you up to shoot this show. And then I had been doing stuff with Tumbledown, and then they were finally finishing that full length Arthur album.
Oh yeah.
And so again, I was just around, in their space. So they were like, come, let's shoot all this stuff at like the same time and work on it all at the same time. And then I think that just bled into like 2012 when they did their 20th anniversary shows. They did 2 in California and 2 on the West Coast or East Coast. So by that point, like I had just done enough stuff, sometimes paid stuff. Sometimes it was just me, like just going to shoot because it's my friends now and my favorite band still. So why not go shoot? And then, they just kind of speckled in there until they kind of really started hitting it again in 2017. And they had a new manager at that point. And at the beginning of the year, like I was just kind of doing some stuff with them. And then by the end of 2017, like I was sort of officially back in like the fold. So.
Yeah. Just to touch on a few of those things, I loved those pictures that you took in the on the cover too. It was cool to have the cover, a recreate of the original, because that, like for me, was my first introduction to MXPX. Was that first on the cover, and that was like before I even really knew what punk was, and a friend had that tape, and I was just so intrigued by it, and so it was cool, 10, 15, or I guess 15 years later to recreate that. And then to have them, dressed as the bands. Like there's some hilarious pictures in there, and that is just something unique that stands out. So good job on that. Yeah, and also, man, I wanted to get to those Life in General, anniversary show so bad. I mean, it was just too impossible coming from where I am. But yeah, what was that like to be in that room, with those songs that had been out for, that was the 20th anniversary? Is that what it was?
I don't know if it was actually. I just think it was something we had talked about, just doing, like, it's kind of like, why not play this record? Like, this is what you're known for.
Yeah.
Like, play it, and they did, that was something they wanted to do. And then it just sort of coincided with, like, we're going to do this, but this is also going to be like Yuri's last show.
Right. Okay.
So that show was really, I mean, it was emotional. It was really surreal.
Yeah,
like,
I can imagine.
Just to be there and to be like, man, this is going to be really fun, but also to know, like, this is also the end of something. Like, will they carry on? Will it be the same? Things like that. And, but geez, dude, like, that was still, I think, my favorite show that I've ever been to.
Yeah.
Just because from the second they started until the end of playing that album, like, the entire room was screaming every word and just so energetic, and they were so energetic, and it being a tiny club, like, made it so fun. I mean, it was maybe 500 to 700 people or something, but it was sold out. Like, I had friends waiting outside the whole night, like, because it was sort of a venue inside a casino.
Oh, okay.
So being outside, you were still inside the building.
Right.
And I mean, my friends stood out there all night because you could still hear it. So why not? And it was just like, it was just the best. Yeah. Like, I mean, so I just, I consider myself really lucky being able, to be there, because, like I said, when I got introduced to them in junior high, like, they quickly became my favorite band. Yeah. And so, I always tried to bring that to everything. Like you said, with, like, the On the Cover thing, like, that was the second or third thing that I got of theirs, and loved it. I mean, I loved some of the songs, and I remember listening to it one day and my dad recognizing one of the songs.
Oh yeah.
Educating me on who it was and stuff. He's like, this is this old worship pastor, Keith Green. And,
yeah.
And so I learned, oh my gosh, like, this is, this connects, like, me and him to something, and so I always tried to approach everything like a fan, where I'm like, what would I want to see, like, from this band, instead of, like, I think this is cool, or I think this is where they're going, or I think this is what they should do. I always just looked at it as, like, man, if I was a fan, and, it was easy because I'm like, I am.
Yeah.
So as a fan, what do I like? What do I enjoy from these guys? What do I want more of, and stuff like that. And so that's always just what I tried to bring to people, so.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Yeah. When I first heard that first On the Cover, is like, I had no relation to any of those songs. I never heard them before. So to me, it was just like MXPX songs. However, some of the songs were a little bit odd. And then, I was a little thrown off. I was like, okay, there's like this really fast punk song. And then, like the song like, Oh Boy. I was like, what is this? Like, this is so, and it wasn't until like 20 years later, I'm sitting in the dentist chair and like Take On Me or something comes on the radio. And it's like, oh, that's what this song's supposed to sound like. Okay. I just never even thought, I mean, it was just I didn't have any concept of, how to correlate those two. But anyways, yeah, so MXPX, before COVID, they were doing all these awesome weekends and one-off shows for the last few years. And you've been at pretty much all of those, is that correct?
Yeah, so I definitely missed a few. But like I said, in 2017, that kicked off their 21st or 25th anniversary. And their manager was like, hey, could you maybe go to this show in San Diego? And I was like, yeah, I was going to go to Ventura, but I can go to San Diego too. So I did those shows. And then shortly after, I moved out of California out to Chattanooga. And then that summer was like their actual like anniversary. And so they were like, we want to have you in Seattle. We want you here. So I flew out and did a couple days there. And then a couple months later, they played in Nashville. And obviously that was like 2 hours away. So I went and did that. And then I think right after that, they did New York, and I did not do that.
Okay.
And I'm not sure like they were as pleased with the content that they got. And so I think that sort of like is what helped me kind of get brought back in, like as like, hey, this stuff we liked, and this okay, let's make sure, like, let's do what we can to get Jered around again. And then since then I think like there's been one or two shows that I've been able to go to on my end, but it was sort of like at the end of 2017 they were rebuilding like an actual crew, because it had been sort of just like, oh, we're going to play a couple shows. All right, let's call and see who's available. And then when they got their manager in like, what was that, 2015, 14, somewhere in there. I think he slowly started to piece things together, where he's like, all right, like I want to have somebody actually running things like a tour manager and consistently be there. And then, all right, I want these guitar techs, like these guys have been to these shows, and then I became a part of that. And the team sort of just came together. And then we had sort of an operating crew again for all these weekend shows of like Andy doing front of house, and we had Brent doing like tour managing, and myself doing photo, and then we either had Trevor or Brad teching, and so it just sort of became this like rhythm. And I think everybody saw how, like, even though it was only a weekend once a month or once every couple months, having the band and crew consistently together just like built this rhythm for everybody and stuff. So it was really cool.
Yeah. What was that experience like, being included in that, especially, after that time away, there's kind of more hype with the band, especially because they're only, playing select places, and it's the original lineup. Yuri's back again, which is amazing. That's so cool that all worked out. And how was that experience? Just being in the rooms and being a part of that, and
it's always been awesome. It's definitely not lost on me. There are times doing things in the music scene where it gets old and it's just going through the motions and things. But, and I mean, honestly, sometimes even backstage or whatever, it can feel like that. But the second they get on stage, instantly transported and reminded, like, this is such an honor to like, I know it's not like, Bruce Springsteen or whatever, but in our world, exactly. In our world, it is, it's something different and it's special. And I try to remind myself that, and I try not to downplay it. I try not to be like, oh, well, I'm not shooting U2. So, it's like, dude, it doesn't matter. I don't care about U2 the same way. So who cares? And so it's been rad. Like, it's been really cool these last few years. Like, everybody's just really excited when we go and do shows, and everyone's really like happy to see each other and spend time together. And the fact that the crew's spread out around the country a little bit too, I think plays into that. And like, Mike having moved a few years ago too, like it was really fun that like we weren't constantly on the road and just like kind of bummed out in middle America on a weeknight, at a show that's not drawing. Like, it was fun to just get somewhere on a weekend and get to hang out, and then head out, go home, and do it again a month later. And so everyone was just really happy all the time. Like, everyone was really excited to spend time together, and everyone worked really hard for the weekend, and everyone's helping each other out. And so it was definitely an honor to like be a part of that. Not just like, oh, I guess we'll bring him around, or, oh, I guess like we'll let him, come and shoot or whatever. It was like, no, like we're going to fly him across the country to come shoot this instead of having someone in town shoot it. Or no, we're going to fly to the other side of the world with him for one show. Like, so.
Yeah. Cause you went to Japan or something with him.
No, I didn't do those ones. I
Oh,
went
okay.
to Indonesia.
Oh,
with them.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, what was that experience like? That's crazy.
It was an awesome show and a really cool experience, but all of us were like, did we just spend 4 days flying to be in this country for like 1.5 days? Yeah, that happened. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I think we all wished it could have been a little longer or piggybacked on some other things, but still, it was an amazing experience. It was really fun.
Yeah, if you had to pick one standout show from these kind of return to form for them from the last few years, what show would that be? Or do they all?
No. I mean, there's probably different things. Like, I probably like certain shows because I'm like, oh man, the lighting was really great and the crowd seemed into it, so they seemed into it. So I got my favorite photos. But honestly, one of my favorite shows is the last show that we did together before COVID hit. We were in San Antonio and they played a really small kind of punk club called the Paper Tiger. And that place did not have good lighting. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do something I never do. I'm going to have to shoot with flash. And there's no barricade, so I have to be on the stage, or
Wow.
maybe I always try, if there are MX fans that I know or loosely know in the crowd and it's a show that doesn't have a pit, I'll approach them right before the band gets on stage. I'll like run out on the stage and crouch down and say, hey, at some point, either right now for 2 or 3 songs or later on in the show, can I come hop in here with you guys? Is that okay? And every time, all those fans are always so kind to make space and to let me, intrude for a few minutes.
That's awesome.
And so there were a few of those fans that had flown into San Antonio for that show. So I was able to ask them, and yeah, they were gracious and let me hop in for a few songs and then help me hop out and stuff. And those fans always keep me safe, which is really nice. But that show was just like, I mean, the band was into it and was having a great time, but it just felt like the old punk shows, like, again, having no barricade. Like,
Right.
people were climbing up on stage and crowd surfing and stage diving, and the band was just super energetic the whole night. It was just so much fun.
Yeah, man, that sounds amazing. Yeah, I was at the 2 Calgary shows that they did, so the only Canadian ones, and I was a little disappointed that you weren't there.
Yeah, that I think was pre 2017, right?
I
I think it was maybe 16.
Oh no, I don't feel like it was that long ago. Like it was like since they've kind of come back to do these one-off shows.
Yeah, they were doing so in 2015. They did 3 nights in Hollywood where they played songs off all those
Right.
different records.
Yeah.
And then I think in 2016 or so might have been some more of those, like Chicago and Calgary and things like that. That at least, if memory serves me, because
Yeah, it could have been.
I don't remember Canada ever coming across my plate and me saying no, other than this last, I think it was last September, they played in Canada. They played a little festival with the Offspring.
Oh yeah,
And-
Montreal, I think.
Yeah, and I did not go to that show because I had a kid born, so
Right.
I stayed at home
Yeah.
for that
Well,
instead.
good choice.
But yeah, no. Well, I apologize, and I will get back to Canada with them someday.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, well, I just felt grateful that I mean, Calgary is 8 hours away from me. I mean, it was definitely worth the drive up, and I was just glad that it was, somewhere decently close, because most bands, either just go up to Vancouver, BC, or on the East Coast, they, just do Toronto, Montreal, kind of those bigger
Yeah,
cities,
right.
Which
Yep.
makes sense because you can just kind of drive up from the state underneath, whereas there's not as much over here. But so on these shows, they've had some awesome openers. I'm curious, what's been your favorite opening band that they've had on these shows?
Most of the shows that I do is either like Slick Shoes or 5 Iron Frenzy. I'm trying to think. A couple of shows we recently did, they had Teenage Bottle Rocket, and that was
Right.
fun. But I mean, for me, I mean, I grew up on Slick Shoes, and I
Yeah,
grew up
so
on
good.
Five Iron Frenzy. So anytime those guys and gal open, it is always a treat because here are more friends. So, but I will say, like, getting Five Iron's been more often, so I definitely have been treated to that more. So it is a little bit of a bonus when it's Slick Shoes because they haven't been as many shows.
Right.
So that's probably my favorite, just because I don't get to see it as often.
Yeah, man, I would have loved that too. Yeah, that was one of the disappointing things with Calgary is they didn't bring any openers with them. There was just a few locals each night.
Yeah, right.
Which it's probably a bit harder to get bands across the border or
Yeah,
whatever. But yeah, it's so
totally.
hard seeing these shows in the States. Yeah, with Slick Shoes, Five Iron, Dogwood, Masked Intruder, like all these bands that like I would love to see. Some of them I saw years and years ago, but so for a band like MXPX who's been around for so long and has so many sing-alongs in their songs, how much does the crowd response impact the photography for them, or does it?
I think it can, because I mean bands always play off the crowd, and so if a crowd is not into it, which I saw a lot when I was starting out in the LA area, because LA is just such a hard market. Like, people are way too cool to get into shows there, and so a band who's doing really well on a record can come to town and just have an off night because the crowd just won't give them anything.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it plays a big role. And what's been really fun these last couple of years is, like, when the guys, put out their newest record, the self-titled, they started right out of the gate putting 4 or some nights 5 new songs in the set from the new record, and people went just as nuts for those songs as they did the old favorites.
Wow.
And so I think the guys were always surprised, and that made them have more fun and made them play harder and things like that. So it definitely plays a big factor. I mean, they're all professionals and they know how to still play and have fun and do the work.
Yeah.
But you can definitely tell it's on another level when the crowd's into it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, because sometimes on shots, you'll take it from kind of the back of the room and you have the whole crowd in there, and then sometimes it's right up front where you can really see the fans' reaction, and I just always love that. It just adds so much energy to the picture when it's not just the band playing, because they're probably going to have energy because they're playing, but to see the fans' reaction, that always adds so much to a photo.
You just want to give context, sometimes, like, I guess in my early years, it was always just about shooting the band. And then as I grew a little bit, or I'd like to think I've grown a little bit, it's about telling a story, and so you want to tell that story from different perspectives and angles and stuff, to show the size and to show the time and to show the energy and, who's there and how they're reacting and enjoying and feeling the show. So,
yeah. Well, I'm sure there's been a lot of, surreal moments shooting for them, like you've mentioned. If you had to pick one moment that stands out above the rest, what would it be and why?
Oh man, surreal. One was that Life in General show in Vegas. They were finishing getting ready to start sound check, and Mike and Tom were on stage, and for some reason Tom wasn't in the room, and they were waiting a few minutes, and they said something, and I was like, I can help sound check for a minute. And they're like, all right. And so I got to hop up on stage, and I mean, my nervousness took over. And so I played even worse than I would if I was, but I mean, that just felt surreal to be like trying to play a song with Mike and Yuri. And then, at their Seattle one of the Life in General's, end of the night, one of the last songs, I'm so bad with track names, but I think it's Destroyed by You. At the end of the song, it has the na 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 na
Oh yeah.
na. On one of the last ones, I leaned over to Tom's microphone with him and surprised him and just started singing into it with him, and half expected him to like push me to like get out of here, but he was just like super glad to have me sing. And actually, that reminds me, the most surreal was at their 25th anniversary weekend. They did a karaoke night at a bar where they were the band and people sang their songs with them. And halfway through the set, Chris, their other guitar player, went over to the other guys, and then they like kind of secretly talked for a second, and then Mike was like, all right, coming to stage next is actually our photographer. And I was like, oh, what? And so I got up on stage and I sang My Life Story with them. And that was really surreal to sing the whole song and to be up like dancing on stage with them for a few minutes and just kind of kidding around with them. And that was weird. That was fun. I was like, I don't think young high school or junior high me would have ever believed that, but that happened. So
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a cool idea to have them. So like fans
totally.
could just come up and be like, I want to play this one, or did they have a set of like, here's 25 songs you can pick from kind of thing? And
I think it was like a submission thing that people had done beforehand. Like not like they auditioned, but like,
right.
I think certain people knew about it and had submitted like, hey, I want to do this, do that, do whatever.
Yeah.
So I think they did like 10 or 12 people, but it was awesome. It was so fun.
Yeah, I don't even know what song I would pick if I had that chance to do it.
Right? Yeah. Hopefully, if they do it again and you're there, someone just picks for you. That's the nice thing. You're like, okay.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Cool. Well, to wrap things up, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. I'd love to hear what your top 5 MXPX albums are.
Ooh.
You're a longtime fan. This shouldn't be too hard for you.
Yeah, no, not at all. So let's see. Obviously, Life in General is number 1 for me. Just meant a lot to me when I got it.
Yeah.
Spent time with it. Ever Passing Moment is number 2. I love that record.
Yep.
I think it's amazing. Slowly is probably number 3 for me. Again, just nostalgic, and some of the songs that I maybe didn't like back in the day, which would have pushed that album lower, I've actually come to really love later on in life. Yep. So I'd probably put Self-Titled at number 4. I think this new record is fantastic, and the only reason I don't put it higher is the others, I think, just carry more nostalgic weight for me. But I think the songwriting on this new record and the songs themselves are just fantastic. The guys did an amazing job. Number 5, that's the hard one.
There's a lot to pick from. There's like 15 albums. I could take that number 5.
Tonight, I would say I would put Before Everything and After on there.
Oh, wow.
That again was just a record that it came to me at a weird time in life, and it meant a lot. I spent a lot of time with that record. So
yeah. Well, that's the thing about music. It's not necessarily, always the fan favorites or even the best.
Right.
Musically, a lot kind of goes with what you're going through or the experience you have with it. And I mean, I've got lots of albums like that where it's, probably not the band's, most acclaimed album, but, it stands out for different reasons. So, no, that's awesome. I always love asking, longtime MXPX fans that, especially, someone that's had a relationship with the band. And, there's kind of the given ones, with Life in General and
sure,
Buffalo
totally.
and some of those. But I always like hearing kind of what some of those other ones are. So, But awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate your time and just sharing your experience. We'll have you on again some other time to talk about some of the other experiences you've had doing photography for bands. But this will be an awesome part to kind of our series on MXPX that we're doing on the podcast. So thanks so much for adding to it. We're really, really excited to have you on.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. It was a blast.
This one here's our booty. You want to get to him, you go through us.